Fort Collins was really growing, and electrical appliances became very commonplace during the 1920s, 1930s. You open up the Montgomery Ward's catalogs from that time period, or you went to appliance stores here in town, and they had all kinds of appliances for sale. I'm sure you've seen the old toasters that are for sale in antique shops, right? Many of those date from the 1920s, those chrome, beautiful little toasters. That was a big deal to get electricity into a house, and appliances started exploding in number and variety. And electricity during the period of the 1920s and 30s became less of a luxury and more of a necessity. A good example of that is in 1931, Thomas Edison died, and there was a movement sprung up, not so much of a movement, but there was talk after he died about having a 1-minute moment in the United States, across the country, where all the electricity would be cut off for just 1 minute in his memory. And it was negated. The government said there's no way we're going to do that because it would cause an enormous amount of damage to the American economy to turn the power off for 1 minute. Okay? It was no longer a luxury. It was a necessity. Can you imagine? Even to honor the guy that invented it all. Okay. So in 1923, let's talk about how this plant came about. Northern Colorado Power merged into another company that had recently been incorporated. It was known as Public Service Company, based in Denver, Colorado. And the Public Service Company really sought to dominate the electric power industry in the state. What happened then, from 1923, when Public Service took over, till about the mid-1930s, was that Fort Collins was really struggling with that company's monopolization of the electrical industry, and the fact that the rates, the cost of electricity, were completely unregulated. In other words, the company could charge whatever it wanted, and the customers just had to pay. And the city of Fort Collins was frustrated, increasingly frustrated with that situation, and city leaders were really seeking a way to become independent of the Public Service Company. In 1932, in February of 1932, the city council was presented with a study that they had commissioned from a Denver consulting engineer who they hired to take a look at the feasibility of establishing a home-based, Fort Collins-based electrical power system to break free of Public Service Company. It was really, we're talking about the depths of the Depression here. Terrible economic time to be looking at building an electrical system locally. But the issue gained momentum. It really took off. In September of 1932, there was a municipal election held, and the voters approved a bond issue of $745,000 to finance the construction of a Fort Collins electric system. City leaders, though, were concerned about issuing bonds during what was a terrible economic time. They were worried about how are we going to pay this back. You know, this is going to be a real problem. So they instead turned to the Federal Public Works Administration. It was a New Deal agency out of Washington, D.C., to request a combination of loan and grant funding totaling $738,000. And in November 1933, the Public Works Administration agreed to finance the project. All right, but that wasn't the end of it. Public Service Company was not happy about this. You can imagine they were going to lose a lot of business. So they took the city to court. And there was legal wrangling that went on from 1933 to 1935 over this whole thing, a series of legal cases. And during the course of those legal cases, the financing from the Public Works Administration fell through. They canceled the agreement. So now the federal funding is gone. The city of Fort Collins is engaged in several legal battles over whether they can extract the electrical system from Public Service Company. In April 1935, the city negotiated the sale and made an arrangement to sell $745,000 in bonds to a Denver investment firm. The city had been approached by a Denver investment firm that said, look, we're willing to buy the bonds in one fell swoop and get you the money you need to build this system. In exchange for, I think the interest rate was 4.5% on that bond sale. It was almost like a loan in a way. And the city went ahead and did that and took the money and went to Public Service Company and just bought their system. They didn't buy the Lafayette plant or anything like that. They just bought the existing wiring system that was here in the city of Fort Collins for $745,000.
Public service didn't have to sell.
I didn't have to sell, but I guess it was enough money. 1935, during the Depression, that they went ahead and did it. Okay, so now, all of a sudden, the city of Fort Collins sets up a utility department to manage this electric network that they just bought, but there's no power coming to it. I mean, in the meantime, they had power coming still from Public Service Company, but they wanted to build, the city leaders wanted to build a local electric plant. Now we get to what this is all about. In October 1935, ground was broken on this power plant atop what used to be, does anyone know what this used to be? I know Wayne knows. The city dump. We're standing on the city dump here. Okay. We'll talk about this more when we get to the bridge tour that we're going to do, but College Avenue wasn't where it sits right now. It was much lower than it is now. And the ground here was also lower. Okay, and because it was low-lying and prone to flooding periodically, people started dumping things here.
Oh dear.
Okay, and it became the city dump because it was a low-lying area. It was along the river. I guess people didn't think about contamination at the time. But I can tell you that when they were working on the Whitewater Park here, in the last year, I was invited to go down into the area where the construction's going on after they had peeled off the retaining wall, and you can see debris from the dump coming out of the wall, the dirt wall, right on the far side of this building here. I actually pulled a horseshoe out of the dirt.
Oh my God!
So there's all kinds of stuff buried underneath there that, we'd probably like to take some shovels and start digging. Yeah, we'll plan a weekend and do that. Hey, would that be okay? Just excavate it. You don't need this front lawn.
They found when they expanded the basement, they dug in.
Oh yeah, Wayne says when they dug the basement for this, I'm sure they did dig up a lot of debris.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't an official city dump. This was just happenstance.
That's how they did those things back then.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, even back when they built the Ossipon North Side, that was one of the issues with the gas from the foundation. And so the dump went way down.
So I've seen a map of the extent of the dump. There was more than just the dump going on here. Just as a point of interest, there was also a coal gasification plant that was sitting. I'm trying to remember exactly where it was sitting. It was over this direction. Do you remember where it was? It was over off of. Yes, it was. It was over next to where's the ASLAD Center is now. Yeah, off of Willow. There was a big plant where they took burned coal and extracted gas from it.
Oh my gosh.
And that plant contaminated this area.
Oh.
So the contamination that, remember a few years back, they were finding contamination in the river. Some of it was from that old coal gasification plant. And it was filtering, percolating through the dump site here and into the river. So it wasn't just the dump, there was other industry going on in the area. Okay. All right, so ground was broken here on the new power plant, October of 1935. The dump, by the way, it started here around 1912 or so. People started dumping things here. The general construction contract was awarded to the F.J. Kirchhoff Construction Company of Denver for $90,000. Additional costs that were incurred to outfit the building with equipment and all took the total of the project up to about $124,000 as a whole. In 1936, the construction of what was known as the Municipal Light and Power Plant was completed in May of that year, May of 1936. The facility consisted of 35,000 square feet in this building. It included two 1,875 kilowatt coal-fired generators. So they were burning coal. This was a coal plant. Supplied around 3,800 customers initially when they first built it. And there were two smokestacks up there. How many do you see now? And they're not really smokestacks, okay? But those are the locations of the original smokestacks. There were originally just two of them because there were two boilers. It was coal converted to steam, converted to electricity. All right, that's how the plant worked. When the plant opened, it cut everyone's electric power rates in half in the city from what public service was charging. This was a big deal.
Yeah.
Still during the middle of the Depression. And all of a sudden now Fort Collins not only controlled its own plant, it controlled its own rate structure. This was a huge development for the city. In 1936-37, after the plant was built, the grounds that we're standing on were all landscaped. This was an amazing thing to have happen. This was part of what was known as the City Beautiful movement that had started up after the 1893 Columbian Exposition in Chicago, which promoted the improvement of the urban environment for the benefit of everyone. You didn't have to just live on an estate out in the countryside to live in a beautiful environment. The City Beautiful movement promoted across the country the idea of improving the urban environment for the American public. Fort Collins, remarkably, went and improved the grounds of an industrial plant. Where did you ever see that? This is almost, in a way, a predecessor to what Woodward did over at its facility at Drake and LeMay, if you think about it. Taking an industrial facility grounds, the grounds around an industrial plant, and beautifying them for the benefit of the public. Okay. Something that, was a remarkable thing, a park-like setting. Now, when you came into Fort Collins prior to that, or left town, you're driving by the city dump, right?
Yeah.
An eyesore. I'm sure it smelled too. And if you weren't smelling that, you were smelling the sugar factory down the road, which was horrible, especially during the summer months. Now all of a sudden people are coming into town over the College Avenue Bridge, which was lower, this bridge was a predecessor, but all of a sudden you're passing this beautiful building, landscaped grounds. My goodness, what a change. All right, and we're going to look at a little bit more of that in just a second. Now, the architecture of this building, it can be debated as to whether it's Art Deco or Art Moderne. I would argue it's probably closer to Art Moderne style architecture. Let me just tell you real quickly what that means. That style was primarily used on commercial and public buildings. It emphasized horizontal lines. If you take a look at the building, see if you can spot what I'm talking about. Horizontal lines, not vertical. Art Deco was often more vertical. Art Moderne was more horizontal. Okay. The stepped flat roof line, we definitely have that here, right? Machine age industrial design. There's something almost kind of fits that in a way. Had they not used brick, it would look even more so like that. Now the brickwork is what an architectural historian like myself would call variegated brick. Does anyone know what variegated means? Different colors. They didn't just go with one color of brick. They ornamented the building by using different colored bricks, okay, that all fit together nicely. There's terracotta banding that increases the horizontal appearance of the building at the tops of the walls. The geometric main entrance that you see over here on the front with terracotta decoration around it. Also the multi-light windows with metal frames, not wood frames, with metal frames. And then the smokestacks almost make me think of a ship. The building to me has just a bit of a feel of like a steamship. And that's also part of that Art Moderne, very much so part of the Art Moderne. The only thing it's missing are round windows that would have increased that feel to it, but there's something of that there to my eye. What it is missing that also was often common with Art Moderne are rounded corners and those porthole windows. They weren't always present, but sometimes they were present on Art Moderne buildings. Okay, this facility, as I said, became the most notable property that travelers in and out of Fort Collins from the north would encounter as they were coming in and out of town, and it was really remarked upon. Now, just quickly after it was built, and then we're going to go look at a couple other things here.
Do you have to build it?
Yeah, the Kirchhoff Construction Company out of Denver. The first electric traffic signal showed up right after that.
Oh my.
1937 in Fort Collins at Mountain College.
Oh yeah.
All of a sudden, you got to stop at a traffic signal. There's electricity there. A third steam boiler was added to the plant in 1939, so all of a sudden there were 3 smokestacks.
Oh wow.
The fourth boiler was added in 1942, 4 smokestacks. So the way it appears today is with the 1942 appearance to it.
Had their customer base increased that much?
Yes, and the reason why is the population kept
Yeah.
increasing.
Yeah.
Between 1940 and 1960. See, you led me on to my next point here. Nice job, Sue. Thank you. I'll get you the $20 later. The population of the city doubled between 1940 and 1960, to the point where by 1960 there were, can you imagine, 25,000 people
Oh,
living
that's
here.
it? Oh my God.
Crowded, traffic, rush hour, all of it. 1960. Between 1949 and 52, there was a new 5,000 kilowatt generator installed inside, along with a new cooling tower that was placed on the south side of the plant. We're going to talk about water use here in just a moment.